Now we're going to be looking at teams, team development, and so forth. And of course, as leader of a team, you have to think and be aware of all their different personalities. And, we've looked a little bit about Belbin's team roles. So you have a whole mixture of people in your team, including yourself. And you somehow need to pull that together into a single team. And you have to be able to represent more senior management to your team, and you have to represent your team to more senior management. And sometimes it can be a tricky role, being that person in the middle who has to be interacting with both teams, because you're the leader of one team and you're a member of another team. And it's not always easy to play that role and to be able to communicate the right things in the right direction. So it's just sort of worth being aware that you have different roles to play in those different things. When you're communicating from senior leadership downwards, sometimes you may know information which it may not be right to pass on all of the details to your team. Maybe it is. You have to judge based on the situation, but you have to be aware that these are two different roles, and you have to communicate things carefully between those two. If you just think to yourself that you're going to communicate everything freely because that's kind of fair and right, you're going to get into trouble, because often in the lower team there may be a whole lot of details and fine, operational stuff that the senior team don't necessarily want to know about. They want to know about impact and what are the specific needs of your team, etc. Where similarly in the team above, you're going to be hearing big picture strategy stuff, which may not always apply in its entirety to your team, who may be taking only one part of that strategy and forwarding, and operationalizing it. So it's just about being aware that you actually play a part in two different teams, and those two roles may be quite different, and you have to sort of jump between those two roles. There's a chap called Peter Drucker, who's a very famous sort of management author. And he talked about there being different kinds of team in fundamentally how they work. He says that some teams are a little bit like in the game of baseball, where you have a bunch of people who have rules applied to the game. So that there is a structure that holds them together and dictates who does what. But essentially, each individual player on the team, their contribution adds to the whole. Yeah, so it's not that they're necessarily kind of like they are working together. Their total score gets added up, but they are actually working as a series of individuals working together on this team. And so it's kind of like you pool their results together. Whereas other teams are more like American football. I mean, this guy is an American, so he's going to be using American sports analogies. In American football, all of the guys on one side of the team, or all the girls on one side of the team, they organize themselves before the play begins, and they coordinate who's going to do what. I'm going to pass to you, you're going to pass to me, I'm going to knock him down, we're going to run, They work out what they're going to do in advance, and so they function as a body to do what they want to do. And then, of course, there is the third type of team where they're all on the pitch. There are some sort of plays, a little bit like the American football, but basically it's all about responding. It's about keeping your area, your area of responsibility, and whatever comes into it, you deal with. You respond to whatever comes into your patch. And of course, different teams that we might be a part of, some of them are going to be about those pooled results. It's going to be, all the different members on our team together We just combine what we do, and that results in the impact that our team can have. Let's say, for example, on an IT team, you're going to have the person who's good at networking, the person who's good at hard drives, the person who's good with software. Each person does their own bit in their own discrete area of expertise, and together the combined result is great, hopefully. Whereas you have teams that have to work together, I don't know, maybe on sort of capacity building in a community where, some are going to be bringing in knowledge about processes, others will be bringing in networking into the local community and the local authorities, others will be working with donors, and together in a very coordinated way, they deliver a program that is a success, hopefully. Or this third one with the reciprocal actions, this could be maybe like a finance team who, each person in the team has their own area of responsibility. One deals with this donor, one deals with this set of donors, one deals with this government, one deals with the auditors, and whatever job comes in, it's then divided between the team. So that, that's coming from, that's a matter of accountability. That goes to the auditing guy. This one, it's a message from this donor. That goes to this person, and so forth. And, tasks are divided up according to actions. So, there's different kinds of teams, and it's just about being aware, what kind of team do I need to deliver the results that my team is committed to? I did some research to try and find out, what are some of the traits, what are some of the skills, what are the practices of some great teams. And actually, there's an awful lot of information out there. And some of it is quite conflicting because quite a lot of the information that's out there is not actually academically tested. It's just what different people think. So it's more anecdotal evidence. So I've tried to pull together a whole lot of that anecdotal evidence and condensed it to try and come up with a list of these are some of the things that can lead to a great team, apparently. Top of the list is about commitment to shared objectives. If all of your team are focused on achieving a goal and they're really committed to that, it's much more likely that you'll get there. Secondly, members are selected for the skills that they bring to well-defined roles. So however the team is made up, whether it's baseball or American football or basketball, people are bringing a certain range of skills, and you have to make sure that the right person is in the right job. Lots of people talked about how in the early days of team development and team growth, in these first few meetings, that really helps to define who is going to do what and how we're going to work and what the style of our team is, what's the culture, so direction and pace, definitely things where the leader needs to be involved in setting that direction and setting the pace. Fourthly, the leader needs to be aware of how the team is interdependent on other external forces. It's not enough just to be focused entirely on your team. The fact is your team operates within a space that is occupied by other teams as well. Maybe within your organization, there are other pressures on the team. There's also customers or beneficiaries. There are donors or investors, or, there are many forces pressing on the team, and a good leader needs to be aware of what's happening inside the team, but also what's happening outside of the team that is putting pressures on the team, and recognizing that interdependence. Team members also need to trust one another. That is one of the core things of a really successful team, is when team members trust one another, and that the leader sets goals that are attainable. They're realistic, they can actually be achieved. They need to be stretching but achievable. And lastly, several authors talk about how leaders need to set a kind of the rules of the game. Like we were talking, what kind of game are we playing? Well, that needs to be clear. It may be on paper, it may be a conversation, it may be a series of conversations, it may be an ongoing picture that the leader refers to, but there needs to be something that ensures that people respect one another, that there are what in America they would describe as no sacred cows, which means no topics that cannot be discussed. It has to be the case that anything can be talked about in this team, but there does need to be confidentiality, that what is said in a safe place and it's not going to go out and cause trouble for the person who said it. And it also needs to be the case that the leader is careful to ensure that everybody in the team is contributing kind of in a fair way, because then it's much more likely that everybody will go through with their jobs and do the tasks that they're set. Now we're coming back to something we had looked at before, this idea of FED, Future, Engage and Deliver. And particularly thinking about, well, what does FED look like within the topic of teams? Well, future is going to be about where something is co-invented. The future shouldn't just come from the leader. Sometimes it has to, but ideally it's something which is created as part of a team exercise, because then engage is something that everybody is much more likely to jump on board with, where together they come together and cement their actions. They combine their actions in a committed way, and then delivery is basically guaranteed. So if there is a combined sense of future, a tightly committed combination of people who are engaging, then together we will achieve something. Well, if you are faced with a situation where your team just doesn't have that sense of energy, doesn't have that kind of life in it, well, you need to do something to energize them. And I would suggest one idea is go for a walk, go outside and ask a few questions as you're walking. Sitting at a table, that hasn't worked so far. Let's try something different. Go outside, go for a walk. Talk to people, get them opening up a conversation of what is it that you really care about? What is it that you are passionate about? What is it that it might be your calling? Which aspects of the organization do you picture in the future that you would be really proud of, that you would want to be a part of contributing to? It's that kind of conversation. Take time for everybody to share. And when, everybody, you're walking along through the forest or, down a path or whatever, make sure everybody has had a chance to say what is on their personal heart. And then you get everybody to then say, well, what are some of the common threads that we have heard? Can you articulate that in different ways? Because, hopefully we will be coming to a point where we can better understand what is the present situation that our team and our organization is in, and start to picture what is the future situation that we're wanting to see different. How do we want things to change? And having created those two pictures, it's also important that we then really understand and kind of define what is the gap between those two things. Just to have a picture of the present or to have a picture of the future, that's not enough. You also have to understand there is a gap. We need to do something about this gap. And of course, some people are going to describe that gap in terms of its size or the degree of commitment that people, maybe themselves or other people, are putting in to close that gap. Or maybe they will talk about how urgent it is to close that gap. They'll have different ways of defining the gap. But you as the leader need to initiate that conversation and get people talking about the gap, because it is the gap that is the thing that you can then work on. That is the thing that you need to be up to. That is the thing that will energize your team. So they'll say, yes, we're up to something. We're going to do this. So what are the priorities? What are the priorities? What are the strategies for attacking that gap, for addressing what needs to be done? Maybe the gap is also defining little bits about the way that the team is made up and how the team needs to work together well. Maybe the gap is actually in saying this team isn't as good as it could be, or we are not pulling together as well as we could, or I don't know, but there could be elements of team working that are also part of the gap. It could be that there are individuals on the team or the team as a whole that need to grow, to develop in some way, so that the gap can be closed. But however it is termed, there needs to be some concrete steps that the leader can bring the conversation back to say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And when it comes to doing, we have a bit of a tendency to focus on the wrong end of things. We kind of know, theoretically, from what we've discussed before, that we should be spending quite a bit of our energy at the relationship level, generating lots of ideas from which we can take a few forward into action, which will result in some good stuff. But actually it all starts at the bottom in this, do we have good relationships in our team? Do we really know each other? Do we really trust each other? Do we have good connections outside of our team to the interrelatedness that we talked about earlier? But often this is not where we focus our energy. Far too quickly, we put all of our effort at the more intellectual level, where we're thinking about strategy and action plans and budgets and trying to operationalize it. But we haven't really defined what it is. And so I would encourage us, take time to build really strong teams where you really know and trust the people that you're working with. It's not just that you are friends. A working relationship goes deeper than that, or it's different. There's aspects of, are you able to inspire one another? Are you also able to challenge one another? It's not just about being nice with one another all the time. A good working relationship also has the capacity to challenge the other person and say, hey, I think you're wrong on this, or I think you need to change in this aspect. Of course, there's also going to be elements of encouraging the other person. And sometimes when we're friends, we kind of don't do that in an active way. We do it in a sort of a passive way by just, being with them. Of course, we're friends. But actually, if in a good working relationship, there needs to be that active encouragement where you say, that thing that you did that really well. Well done. Thank you for contributing. There does need to also be the element of correcting. Are we able to say to somebody, I think you're not doing this as good as it could be done. It could be done better. For the mission, for the reason that our team exists, the goals, the vision of our team. That is why I will bring a correction or a challenge, and why I would bring an encouragement. It's all focused on our team wants to build good relationships so that we can achieve our objectives and achieve our vision. It's not just about being friends for the sake of being friends. It's a working relationship. Okay, think about your team. Do the members of your team have really clear understanding of the future that you have painted? This vision that you might have in your mind, do they know what that looks like? Have you taken time with them to really consider the gap? What needs to change in order to get from today to that future picture? Do they actually believe in their team goals? Is this something that is just with you, or that they also believe it? And is there a sense of urgency in your team? Is there an excitement? Because there needs to be, if you really want to engage people, there needs to be some sense of excitement. And you as the leader, you have a responsibility to create that infectious sense of urgency. Are you passionate about these goals? Do you keep your team focused on, okay, that's what, the end goal is there, but here is the next step. This is the next step. This is the next step. Do you keep them moving forward? Do you keep monitoring their progress so that they can see that they are making progress toward a goal? And do you really take the time to invest in these relationships so they're not just about building friendships, but you are building working relationships where you can bring encouragement and correction? It's an important thing for leaders to be able to develop their team members into good, strong working relationships.